Hey everybody, this is Ben Atkinson at LinkedIn. Welcome to our interview series, Inspiring Leadership. This week we're going to be talking about leading in partnership, cultural transformation, and managing complex stakeholders. As always, we have Jonathan Bowman-Perks along to host the session. Jonathan, who are we interviewing this week?
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. We have Cath Possamai, and Cath is the CEO of the recruiting group, which is a Capita and Army partnership. And she's going to be talking about leading in partnerships, cultural transformations, and managing complex stakeholder partnerships. And dealing with the British Army, as I know, having been in it for 20 years, is difficult for any civilian organization. And recruiting for the Army has its particular complex situations. Cath has had many years of experience in recruitment in all sorts, from Alexander Mann Solutions to various others, working with Zurich and GE. She's got a wealth of experience. She's also a rugby coach, and for her son, I think it's the under-19, the under-12s now. She's been in the under-9s and now the under-12s. Sports at Loughborough, and she's still keeping fit and healthy. So, Cath, welcome. It's great to have you on the Inspiring Leadership series.
Good to be here, Jonathan. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, tell us about the role and some of the important aspects of it.
Sure. So Recruiting Group is a 10-year, effectively, partnering project between the Army and Capita, starting 2012, goes through to 2022. And it's a contract to deliver all aspects of recruitment for the Army. So that's regulars and reserves, soldiers and officers. From the marketing, so the TV ads you'll see and the posters you'll see that tend to be very controversial when they come out every year, deliberately, right through selection, the high street career centres around the country, medicals, fitness testing, into basic training. So the point of basic training is when we stop, but we're responsible for that end-to-end process. And we're very much embedded within the Army. So we sit within a two-star command that's also responsible for all the basic training in the Army. And the team is about 1,400 strong. So I've got around 900 civilians and around 500 soldiers who are serving members of the Army who get rotated into recruiting group, as we're known in the Army, for normally about a 2-year period, and then rotated out again. So it's genuinely a blended partnership of both military and civilian. So quite unique. The contract is set up like a normal outsourcing contract with kind of outcome deliverables, but it has members of the Army working within the team, which is what makes it quite unique as a partner. So it's quite a large team. It's obviously across the whole of the UK, including the career centres, the assessment centres, and then a big national recruiting centre in Uphaven on Salisbury Plain, where we do all of the kind of back office elements. So that a core part of my role is leading that joint team, which culturally is interesting because you've got the very different backgrounds of the staff, being military and civilian. And then another core part of my role is effectively business partnering with the two-star general, so the major general, who's responsible for recruiting and training for the Army. So that's that leading in partnership piece you mentioned at the front. That's what that is all about, and how you bring two very different organisations together in a really kind of coherent, trusting, mutually respectful, collaborative way to deliver a challenging outcome. And then it's a big part of the role is managing the complex kind of stakeholder nexus that I talk about. So there's obviously the Army, there's obviously Capita. You've also got the MOD, the press, and politicians who are very, very interested in what we're doing. And then also the Navy and the RAF as well, because our IT system supports their recruiting. And my team also deliver the medicals for them, for their recruitment process. So it's a very, very high profile process, operation for reasons. Recruiting for the Army is critical nationally, and there are a lot of people who are very interested in how we perform. So it has a very kind of very, very public facing, challenging kind of stakeholder dynamic to it as well.
Yeah, so when you took over, it was there's a lot of criticism being levelled at the recruiting group and the Capita relationship. But you formed a very good relationship with our very first podcaster, Major General Paul Nansen, who's now become, or is about to become, an executive coach himself. And Paul, we have a lot of respect for, Ben and I. And what was it that made that relationship special? Because the two of you turned things around. What made it special?
Well, I think we were very lucky, and we both say this, and we've talked about it a lot. We were very lucky in in comparison with our predecessors, in that we came into our roles, we both stepped into our roles at the same time on either side of the partnership, but at a point where the Capita chief executive, a guy called John Lewis, was new, and he and Nick Carter, who at the time was head of the Army, had a very positive engagement, and both of them agreed to draw a line under everything that had gone before between the two organisations and focus on making the partnership a success. And it was the two of them, that dynamic, that really changed, and they very much tasked their joint leadership teams, so Paul and I stepping into our roles on either side of the partnership with John Lewis used the phrase zippering up the organisations, and the two of us at the kind of 2-star level, I suppose, were very core to that zippering up. We drove that all the way through our organisations as well, to make sure that it really felt like a partnership. And we've reflected, actually, and there were some things that about 2 years on, as he's moved on and left the Army, what made it work. And I think there were a few things. One is we decided to trust one another independently. We didn't talk about it overtly, but we independently both made the decision that we were going to trust one another, which was huge because there just hadn't been that trust on either side of the partnership previously. I think the fact that we had the female-male civilian-military dynamic actually was a huge plus for us, even though we didn't think about it at the time, but we came with very different backgrounds and different experiences. But again, because we trusted one another and were willing to listen to one another, you could access the strengths of both, really, and compensate for the weaknesses of both. So yeah, we were lucky in lots of ways. We came in at a good time, I think, but we also deliberately chose to trust one another, and we leveraged the diversity and the background of experience that we had.
Yeah, and Paul's role now, he's moved on. He was both commandant of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, and he was in charge of recruiting across the whole of the Army. I think that's now done by 2 different generals. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Who are the people you're now working with?
So Duncan Capps now runs Sandhurst, but he has very much an outward-facing role for Sandhurst as ambassador internationally. Chris Bell runs all of the recruitment and training aspects. So Chris Bell is Paul's successor, who I now partner with very closely, and Chris is also fantastic. So I'm hugely lucky to work with two brilliant partners on the Army side of the partnership. Yeah.
So the Army's used to crises and disasters, sometimes bureaucratic ones, but often normally wars or operations. You've been thrown a lot of googlies over the years and different jobs you've had of coming in to sort out a problem, or being in a job when there's a problem and having to resolve it. How has COVID-19 affected what you do, personal life as well as your work? And what's your advice about dealing with a crisis?
Wow, there's a lot of questions there. Obviously, when COVID arrived, similarly to the rest of the country, it was a huge shock. And I think we all now look back with hindsight and think, how did we not see this coming better, nationally and internationally? But when it arrived, we had to close all of the high street career centres that we have around the country immediately. We also had to close all of our assessment centres immediately. Our National Recruiting Centre in Upavon, which has about 400 or 500 people there, obviously we needed to send everyone home and try and find a way to keep the operation going. So the first few weeks were all about getting everyone safe. So as many laptops as we had to make as many people as possible work from home remotely, spreading out shift patterns so people could still do their jobs but not have to be so many people in the building at the same time, leveraging other building spaces in our main HQ. We did all of that as you'd expect. But then obviously we needed to keep the recruiting operation going for our candidates. So we moved everything that we normally do in a high street career centre virtually. So where normally in a high street career centre, candidates would come in and have a detailed career brief from a serving soldier. And then they'd have a very detailed individual career discussion with a civilian recruiter. So we moved all of that. So all of the kind of presentation videos, content, moved that online, developed some more content to make it more engaging, and then allowed all of our soldiers and civilian recruiters to interact virtually with the candidates. And actually, interestingly, we had some fantastically strong feedback from that, which was one of those things that we will learn and take forward in terms of the candidates actually enjoying it, recruiters enjoying it. And we had far fewer what we call fail to attends. So quite often it's quite intimidating actually to screw up your courage, travel to a career centre, ring the doorbell, because you have to ring a doorbell for security reasons, to do all of that and then walk into one of those career centres is quite challenging. But much easier to do it like this, on a screen and virtually. So we had much less fails to attends from candidates and effective operation, interestingly. But the real challenge for us, although we were having applications increase in the early days of COVID, and we could do the early stages of the process all virtually without any problem, the real challenge was assessment centres, because we have to do a face-to-face medical inspection with a full face-to-face medical with our candidates, and we need to do fitness tests as well. And all that had to be done face to face. So really, we had a complete stop from the middle of March until the middle of June, and we then reopened again gradually, changed the format completely in terms of stripping out some of the nice to have that we'd normally do at an assessment centre and slimming them down a bit, but making sure we obviously use PPE, social distancing, all the processes. And actually, in August, we will have the third highest month ever of people in centres. Our two previous highest months at the back end of last year, when we were pushing through, hitting the 100% of the target last year. But yeah, August is our third highest month ever, which, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, the operation have been, my ops team are phenomenal, and they're working, incredibly hard. And it's been a story of really strong collaboration with the Army to get extra resources where we need them, to make sure that we could keep that going and stand that up again. So that's been a huge, we've really, and the word is pivoted, isn't it? Pivoted the operation. We pivoted the operation so that we could keep going despite the pandemic, and keep pushing soldiers through into, and reservists through into the Army. So that's been incredibly interesting, difficult, challenging. I suppose personally, I've carried on going into Uphaven, to HQ the whole way through, because I thought it was really important to be very, very visible to my teams, some of whom had to be in Uphaven as well, and also to make sure I had that face-to-face contact with the general, with Paul and then Chris, who I've been working with, and keep that relationship and close collaboration going. Which is, I think, although you can do this stuff virtually, I think it's better face-to-face if you can, to keep that face-to-face contact up as well. So, but I've been enjoying a bit of a slower pace of life, working from home, seeing kids more. Homeschooling has its challenges, but no, it's, yeah, I mean, I think mostly I've quite enjoyed it. And in terms of advice, I think there are three things. One, I think, is the importance of thinking through to the finish, which I don't know if that's a military term, but it's one I've picked up in the last couple of years, so maybe it is. But when you're thinking about decisions, just think through to the full implications of the decision you're making and what might happen. But equally, don't take too long about it, because you need to make decisions and you need to act in a crisis. So think through to the finish. The second is that leadership visibility. I think you really need, it's more important than ever to be highly, highly visible to your people. And if that means doing it virtually, then that means doing it virtually. So we did things like virtual coffee chats frequently, so that it wasn't compulsory, so people didn't think they had to log on and listen to me. But we did a couple of times a week, and it was there was no agenda. People could ask me questions if they wanted, or otherwise we'd just talk about what TV people were watching or what they were worried about. But just making sure that I was visible and accessible was, I think, really important. And then the last one is, in a crisis, is showing empathy. Everybody is going to experience whatever crisis it might be in a different way. And you need to be sympathetic to that, respect that, and think about that in the way that you interact, rather than just assuming everyone is dealing with it in the same way, I think. So those would be the things I've taken over the last 3-4 months.
Great advice. Which made me think of another one, which I wondered about. What was the tip that you wish you'd known about at the start of your career that really would have helped you throughout your career? Just one thing that you wished you'd known right at the beginning of all this, way back.
Way back. I think it's about being yourself, and just recognizing that it's important just to be authentic. And that's whether it's actually more, especially when you're a leader, actually, I think. But throughout any role, just not trying to pretend some kind of gravitas that you don't feel, or pretend you know the answers when you don't, or just be relaxing and being yourself. Means that you will enjoy yourself more and find things easier. And I think generally people respond better to you if they think they're seeing the authentic version of you. So someone had said to me when I was 18, 19, relax, just relax and be yourself. which is maybe easier to say, maybe harder to do. I think, particularly when you're out in your career, and you're going into environments that you think that you can find intimidating. And I suppose going into the military environments, that's been a real lesson in authenticity for me, actually, because it would have been easy to try and conform to the hierarchies and the military norms and the way of doing things, but actually I deliberately haven't, and I think that's been a strength. I've quite enjoyed fondly teasing my military colleagues about, for example, their absolute need for a seating plan, which I just don't get. I don't know where I sit. There's no hierarchy here. So no, I think having the confidence to relax and be yourself actually is
That's very good. You remind me of when I was an officer cadet many years ago. 40 years ago at Sandhurst, and I went into. We had Sunday church. We all were marched to the church. And I remember going in and seeing that there was a seating plan, and the commandant and the others sat at the front. And I thought, hang on, God doesn't see it that way. There's no pecking order there. That the poor are right at the back and the rich are at the front. This is wrong. It's just fundamentally wrong. Anyway, that's another story.
You tell them.
Yeah. Well, I did once write a small book called "The Army Needs More Maverick Officers." And I presented it to the now General Sir Richard Dannett, who was my commanding officer, and said, I think I was going to publish this. And he went, don't publish it if you want to have a career. I went, oh, okay. So I never published it. It's a shame. I had some really great cartoons in it as well. But actually, what was encouraging for me, I missed a moment, but I had no career anyway, so probably I should have just gone early and broken it early. But I was listening to call sign Chaos, General Mattis. And he said, you need, officers should encourage mavericks and people who are different, because you do need different ways of thinking. So I think it's really encouraging that you are challenging them and teasing them, because you don't want rigid thinking. You do want flexibility. There are one or two things which are quite useful, like when you're on a Zoom call, I now send an Arthur's round table, and I say, these are where people are sitting on the virtual table, so who's going to begin and will go to their left. People know that they're then going to get their turn to speak. So there's sometimes that old rigid rules are useful. How about inspiration? Who inspires you or inspired you as a leader, and somebody who handled challenges well, he or she?
There's a couple who spring to mind. So one male, one female. I think the female who really inspired me is a lady called Dawn Marriott Sims, who was COO of Capita, and I used to work for Dawn. And she was the first, and this is going back a few years, and she was the first woman in a senior role who I saw being determinedly and comfortably really feminine in the way she dressed and the way she acted. So it was the time when women wore business suits, just male versions of female versions of male suits. And Dawn just didn't do that. She wore nice dresses and funky shoes, and she was completely comfortable. And she, before it was cool, she was putting emojis in her emails. And so she was a very, very senior woman who was entirely comfortable in her own skin. And that was very, very empowering to see. So she's an incredible, she was an incredible role model, actually, I think, for me and another number of other females in Capita. To show
what's she doing now?
She is now a partner in a private equity firm. HG, and doing very well, yeah. And she's really talented. I'm not surprised. And then the other, I suppose, it would be, and we've spoken about him already, would be Paul Nansen, who, I said to you earlier, a bit pre coming on air, that I've been privileged to have a 2-year leadership masterclass really working with him. And one of the things that he did really early on, which I noticed and really learned from, is he's very, very good at putting everyone else at their ease by, he's very comfortable showing personal weakness or vulnerability. We were in one of our first big governance meetings, and there was a massive pack full of stats that we were going to get through, and really, really complicated, in-depth data. And everyone didn't really know each other, so people were being very, very formal and a little bit worried about how the meeting might go. And Paul made a joke about within the first 5 minutes about how when he was at Sandhurst he had to go on the Stats for Twats call. And so, you're going to have to do this in words of one syllables, everyone. And immediately everyone, we all laughed, everyone relaxed, and it was much easier. And the fact that the general had said that, he's not very comfortable with data, meant that we all could relax a bit. And it was a much better. And it's just small things like that, very, very, very smart.
Yeah, that's nice. And you're in the business of teams. You've been leading teams, and in partnership, you've got a mixed team. You've got, which is really quite challenging, having a mixture of civilians and military, and then also having to partner at a level. When you've been on an inspiring team that worked well and handled challenges well, which one would you pick to tell a story about, and what qualities did you admire?
I think actually it's my leadership team now, and what we've gone through in the past couple of years in taking what has been what was quite a, I suppose, a downtrodden, to use the term, that's quite a downtrodden team who were, they've been battered by the press, the politicians, Capita, the army for years, and being apparently unable to deliver, and for an awful lot of reasons that were not their own making at all. And being able to, we made a really definite, deliberate decision that we were going to invest in driving the leadership capabilities and qualities of that middle layer management team through and we didn't have a lot of money. Money's tight, really tight. We lost a lot of money on Army recruiting, Capita has, and we didn't have a lot of time either. We were operationally under huge pressure, but we made a decision to invest in what we called the inclusive leadership program, which is all about driving inclusion. And also about driving up leadership capability, and that was a huge investment in our top 100 or so people. But we collectively decided to do that, and my leadership team supported me in that. When that's a time when really we haven't got any money, and we need to focus on the operation. But it was absolutely the right thing to do, and that program drove so much cohesion and cultural change through both military and civilian parts of the organisation that it enabled huge success. And so while we were doing that, we were also dealing with all of the operational challenges, hurdles, bad press, difficult IT system go live that Army recruiting had to cope with. But the team has resiliently stepped up to absolutely everything that's come along. And actually, when we got to middle of March and a pandemic arrived, it really was, there was a bit of a sigh, some black humour, rolling up of the sleeves, and right, okay, what's next then? And they've just, kept going. So, and that is, I think, all about, well, partly the, having been through challenges and been successful together, so we know we can do it. Partly about the kind of esprit de corps that we have from having done all of that, but also about the really clear purpose, I think, that we have. I mean, it would be very easy to go and get another job pre-COVID it would have been, to go and get another job in a recruiting operation elsewhere. But actually, nothing is more important than recruiting for the British Army. And an awful lot of my team have been around for the duration of this contract and haven't chosen to go elsewhere, even when it got really tough, because the core mission, the purpose of what we do is so important. Yeah. I think, that a really powerful purpose will cohere and allow a team to endure a lot as well.
Time and again, meaning and purpose comes to the fore. If you have a clear burning why, you can cope with any what or how. I think it was Goethe, the philosopher, said. And Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's all again, it's about meaning and purpose. Yeah. And the British Army has a clear purpose. Santa's serve to lead was its very, very motto. Also, we found, Ben and I, that the best leaders we come across are willing to admit the mistakes they made. This is part of the authenticity, a bit like Paul Nansen saying, like me, that he was not good at statistics. What would be your story of your vulnerability and your mistakes, and what have you learnt from those early mistakes as a leader that has shaped the leader you are today?
Well, there are loads, clearly. I've made bundles of mistakes. I think one I come back to again and again is not letting things fester, and not hoping that problems will solve themselves. And there's been any number of times that I've been guilty of doing this in my career, whether that was a client relationship issue or a team issue. And particularly last year, I had a real issue within my team where there was a key relationship that just wasn't working. and really wasn't working, and it was causing issues operationally and issues for the team around it. And I just kind of hoped it would fix itself. I absolutely did. And it wasn't until it had, I don't want to be too specific, but it had become very, very challenging. And there was a particular incident I realised I had to deal with it. And I sat the individuals down who were concerned and had a very direct conversation with them, and was very honest and straight with them both. And actually, they appreciated it, and the situation was resolved. And it's that the importance of being at the top of, and there's something called the accountability ladder, which you can Google it, and there's images of it you'll find on the internet. But I carry the accountability ladder on a credit card in my purse, and I have done for about the last 7 or 8 years since I was introduced to it. And it's a really important reminder that you always, as a leader, need to be at the top of the accountability ladder. And actually, we have it on our wall all around Recruiting Group. And it was a core part of our inclusive leadership program that I mentioned. So it's, for us, it's a common lexicon about, and being at the top of the accountability ladder means you are finding solutions and you are making them happen. Being at the bottom of the accountability ladder means, you're exhibiting kind of passive behaviours like blaming others, waiting and hoping, or just refusing to kind of own and drive the situation. So I think there's countless examples where I've found myself sliding into the bottom half of the ladder, and I've had to give myself a real kick in the rear end and say, get up the ladder, get to the top of the ladder. So definitely a number
Great
of
advice. Great advice.
That's you've got to be active and not.
That's really good. And well, I remember, Cath, when we finished going live, do stay on, and we'll just chat at the end of this when we come off air. I'll hand over to Ben shortly, but my final question before I hand over to Ben is, we learn a lot from our darkest moments in our personal life or our work. What would you be prepared to share as one of your darkest moments, what we call life is in transitions, one of your transition points, your turning points in your life, work or personal, and what did you learn from that?
Sure. Again, there's been a few. I think one I'd pick out if I was thinking about the last couple of years was the week before, and it's very clear in my mind, the week before Christmas 2018, when I was about 6 months into my role. We were starting to turn things around, I guess, operationally, but we were still, up against it. And there was a week where we'd had a National Audit Office investigation into recruiting, which was very high profile, and that launched. That was published in the press. So the beginning of my week was dealing with that and the fallout from that, and a lot of press interest. That was tough. And then following that, I got a phone call to say that we were suffering from a cyber attack on our IT system that underpins our recruitment process. We might have to turn it off within the next 7 days. So there was a team. We have to work out how we could operate paperless if we had to in the next 7 days. So weekend before Christmas, cancelled. Everyone worked all weekend. So we were in the middle of that. And then one of my team had a stroke and was seriously in hospital. And then the next day, our advertising campaign, which was ready for launch in January, and we always launch in January, and there's always it's a big deal for us. And actually, it was the infamous snowflake campaign, actually. And the Sun got hold of the story, and the Sun, somehow the campaign had leaked, and the Sun were going to run the story. So in the space of a week, I had all 4 of those things happen. And I remember kind of looking up and going, really? Is there anything else that you want to chuck at me right now? And that was a really, really tough time. And I think, through that, I learned that, allowing yourself to rely on the team around you is really important. Your team can be a huge source of support.
Yeah.
And actually, gallows humor, laughter is sometimes the best medicine to get through these things. I think when times are tough, you have to focus on, and I've said this recently to my team, actually, given the situation we're in now, you have to control the controllables. Those two things. Control the controllables and don't worry about the rest, because you cannot do anything about the rest, but you can control the controllables. I think there's that great Churchill quote about when you're going through hell, just keep going. There's also that, remember that it will pass eventually, whatever you're going through. And then my final thing is I always try and get a sense of perspective in what I do, because ultimately it's just recruitment, right? I know it's important, but it's just recruitment. My sister's a paediatric surgeon at Guy's and St Thomas's. So whenever it's bad, I remind myself that she's cutting open small babies. Whatever tough things I think I'm dealing with, insignificant, really.
Wow. Well, before I hand over to Ben, I'll just say that everything you've shared there is very stoic in philosophy. And I love The Daily Stoic by Marcus Aurelius. And if you read it, each chapter, each day, you'll see many of the things you've talked about, particularly controlling the controllables. And this too shall pass.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. Over to you, Ben. Thank you, Cath.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Cath, so nice to hear about your journey and some fantastic advice there. And I think it's really sort of hit a chord with a number of people who are watching and listening. So if you are watching and listening, with your comments and questions, please do join in. But already we've had a few people comment, so I think it'd be nice to go through some of those and some of those questions as we go. So we've had some comment from Kardak. I believe he works for you. So
that's Q. His name's Q. He's great.
Q. Okay. Yeah. Proud to be working along in your team. So it's a great accolade for you. And we've got a question from Don here. It's a very long question, so I'm going to put it up on the thing, but it may mean that we have to peek over the question. So just be ready for that. I'll change it to a different view, but.
Less is more, Don. Less is more.
Yeah, there we go. So people often prefer perception of a performance of a team to the truth of performance, even if the team are performing well. Can you give any guidance on how I can change the external, wider perception of a very professional team who are doing very good work? And when others in the organisation think they are unprofessional and out of kilter of the organisation and cultures and values? Asking for a friend.
Right, great. Wow.
Let's take that one off there. So we'd have to peer over the top to take the question down.
Yeah, okay. There we go.
So hi, Don, that's a great question. And actually one that really resonates because we've gone through exactly that experience within Capita, I suppose, and within the Army. Recruiting group was perceived within the Army as a failing organisation. And RPP, which is what we're known as in Capita, Recruiting Partnering Project, was absolutely perceived by the rest of Capita as a failing organisation. And people used to get, if you asked, if any of my staff were asked where they worked on RPP, the rest of Capita would say, oh, did something bad in a previous life. So we were, one of the things I really focused hard on, we have 4 themes we focus on, is our people, our candidate experience, our partnership with the Army, and our reputation. Those were the 4 things that we decided we were going to focus on, that we were going to turn Army recruiting around. And that reputation is not just external with the press, but absolutely internal with the Army and with Capita as well. So I would say that the way we have gone about that is making sure that we actively celebrate every single success and do it and publicize it. So whether that's on company intranet, whether that's in your monthly reports to the board, whatever format you have, making sure that you shout about your team's successes, and don't be proud to do that. I would advise you to do that. One thing I did with the Capita board actually was we produced an annual, it was just a leaflet, an A5 leaflet of a very brief 12 pages of what our plan was for the year a couple of years ago when we were resetting what we did, talking about our strategic themes, talking about where the areas we were going to focus on in order to deliver the targets. And it was intended for the internal audience of my own team, so that all 1,400 people really understood very clearly our strategy and our approach. But I also took the opportunity to send that to the Capita board so that they could see what we were doing, and that we had real clarity, and we were organised and structured, and we knew how we were going to go after the challenge. So there's those kind of things, I would say. I mean, I would be unashamedly proactive and boastful about your team's achievements, or your friends. You can tell your friend that you're asking for this. And yeah, but do it. Be really deliberately proactive about it. Don't expect that it will happen otherwise, I suppose.
Yeah, great advice. We've got a few questions from Sean. He's been quite busy with with the questions, so we'll sort of try and rattle through a few of them. So he's mentioning about your turnaround story with the recruiting group and the Army, and just sort of asking, do you think that Capita contract was saved by COVID slightly, reporting for duty?
No, because I think we delivered the entirety of the target last year way before COVID arrived. So we'd done what we needed to do to fix the contract and fix the operation. Absolutely. I do think that, and we're seeing it, that the economic situation, and history has shown time and again that an economic downturn will result in more applications to join the Army, and we are seeing that. So that undoubtedly will support recruitment into the Army over the next 12 to 18 months, I think. But interestingly, it's not just about applications. As I mentioned earlier, actually, it's getting them through the recruiting pipeline. So in a pandemic, getting them through assessment centres and in is actually the more challenging bit than attracting the applications, ironically. But yes, I expect that an economic downturn is going to mean more applications for us. But that's only a small part of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And he follows up just asking your views on the strategic defence review, and lots of leaks coming out. The defence might be shrunk. What are your thoughts?
So I don't. I have no inner path on that one. What I would say is that from a recruiting perspective, we're quite concerned that if I don't know at all, if there is any message that that the Army or the armed forces will be cut, then that could have a really adverse impact on recruiting, because it took us the Army years to recover from the redundancies that were made in about 2009, 2010, and the public perception for a long time was that the Army was closed for business, and wasn't recruiting. And so if there's that kind of message, or that in the press, no matter how true it is or not, then that could have a real adverse impact for us on recruiting. But yeah,
definitely. And finally from Sean, we've got how are you changing to recruit and capture the new type of recruit needed for cyber and security and digital age?
Yeah, another great question. So there's a lot of debate at the moment about lateral entry and how the armed forces need to change from being a bottom-fed organisation. So you join at a private as a soldier or a very junior officer, and how we can capture more skills by allowing people to join at a more senior point in their careers. The Army and all armed forces the MOD has a project that is kicking off now in terms of getting into implementation. Design and the thinking has been done around how they can make lateral entry work. Separately, we do still recruit for cyber skills into soldier roles, and that's into the ironically still named Royal Signals, even though it's not flags anymore. You join the Signals. Actually, you're doing into cyber electronic warfare specialist type roles. So that is absolutely a core part of the roles we recruit for now as well.
Thank you for those questions, Sean. Yeah. Sean, ex-serviceman himself, and a very fine officer, but he does a marvellous weekly blog, which captures what's going on in the world very well. But I was, for 10 of my 20 years, in the Royal Corps Signals and also in electronic warfare. And one of the generals I interviewed recently said, we're going to have to, he was a senior officer just retiring, we're going to have to really look at lateral hires. We've always fed from the bottom, and you had to begin as a second lieutenant or private soldier and work your way slowly up to the top. But that's just not relevant for the current world we're in, and when you need certain specialist skills when you've got to bring people in. And
we also,
it's needed. No, it's just needed.
And we also need to find a way of not, if you are a cyber expert, you do not need to be super fit and medically A1. That's the other challenge to think about, I think, in the coming years as well.
Yeah. And another nice comment from Annette Thorpe. I know as we were discussing the purpose of an organisation, she's really agreeing with that sort of ethos and that journey to work towards your common goals.
I know.
Fiona would like to say inspiring stuff, great role model.
Fiona is one of my team, so you know she's very inspiring herself. Trust me.
Well, some leaders, not on this show, none of their team would ever say they're inspiring, but luckily on this show, we tend to get the team say they are inspiring. And the only reason you came on is because somebody else said you were inspiring, so not because you said you were. So that's interesting.
Oh, fantastic. So some really lovely comments there. And if anyone's got any more questions, please.
It is being recorded for Adam. Adam's asking, I'm late. Has it been recorded? It will be recorded.
Yeah, it's recorded and we'll post it up again. But a couple more questions for you, Cath. And if anything else comes up in the feed, I'll put those questions up. We spoke about sort of how you've sort of dealt with some darker times and getting through crises. And I'd like to know, you mentioned like that humour is often something you use to counteract that and get through these times. And have you got any sort of examples of that, of humorous stories that you recall?
There are. Trust me, there are so many. We have only half joked several times, the Army guys and I, about the tragedy docu sitcom that we will one day write about Army recruiting, and we will not have to make any of it up. But the one that I have told in the past, but not probably in a public forum before, because at the time it was a little bit, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when this one happened. But we had an IT system go live, which quite publicly went badly for the first 6 months or so. But one of the lesser known glitches in this particular system was related to candidate phone numbers. So when a candidate applies, we ask them for their mobile number. We also ask them for their landline number if they have one. And some candidates, for reasons best known to themselves, decided to only put the second half of their landline number, which is the 6-digit second part of your landline number, which would be fine, except for two things. One is that 6-digit numbers are pager numbers. And we, at that point particularly, sent a lot of automated messaging out via text message to try and get candidates to visit their portal and do things in terms of their application process. And obviously, there are still some sections of society that use pagers, like Lifeboat Crew. So we managed in April 2018 to call out the Gosport and Portsmouth, Gosport and Fareham Lifeboat 3 times in the middle of the night.
Oh God.
So and when my team told me this, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, the fact that could have happened. They were basically the pages were going off with the Lifeboat Crew. So what happens, your pager goes off, you get up, you throw clothes on and you run to the lifeboat station. And 2 minutes later, then the message was coming through. George, please go to www.armyjobs.co.uk and check your portal. So, yeah.
How did you make it up to them? Did you send them a hamper?
They were amazing. So no, I rang them, I apologised. They were great. And I said, look, and that's why I arranged £1,000 donation actually from Capita to their charity. And they were incredibly grateful. I said, no, really, it's fine. And they said, well, you must come down and visit the lifeboat. So I went down one summer's day, lovely sunny day it was. I went down and I found myself, the lifeboat called out on a mission, and it came back, and I said, well, what happens now? I said, well, we have to scrub it down because the salt's really bad for the lifeboat. So I found myself scrubbing the lifeboat. That was my penance. But yeah, it was. You literally could not have written that.
Yeah, it's amazing the things that can go wrong. That's so left field.
Yeah, it was completely left field. Yeah,
I love them. So within your sort of career or life, what's your sort of proudest moment for you?
Well, apart from my children, obviously, I must say that. I think in this role, that it was February this year, and standing next to Paul Nansen at a press conference we held up in Harrogate, at which the defence correspondents of the UK were sitting and talking to them about the journey we've been on and the fact that we were going to achieve 100% of the Army's target of the year, which was something that no one thought we were capable of doing. No one. And to be able to stand up and tell that story. And then the next day, there was a front page headline of the Daily Telegraph about it. Was amazing. Really, truly amazing. I was so proud of the team. I was so proud of the team. You know, everyone had worked so hard, blood, sweat, and tears over many years to get to that point. So yeah, hugely proud moment.
Very impressive.
That's fantastic. And just a little quick fire round just on some of the habits that are successful. So we always look at like our inspiring leaders and just look that often they have things that they do all the time or actions that they take that have got them to where they are and made them successful leaders. So we just sort of look at that around the wealthy and wise, and obviously, especially this year, we've all been through some pretty tough times and stressful moments. How have you maintained that sort of healthy outlook, both mentally and physically?
Well, I think there's one thing about, you know, in my job and in lots of our jobs, you could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's still be more to do. So you have to draw a line and stop and just go, right, I'm not doing anymore because otherwise you'd go insane. So there's that, and then I do not as much as I'd like, but get out running and cycling to try and keep fit, and I play cricket as well, actually. So that's getting that started again has been really good. It's been great fun, very therapeutic getting in the nets and smacking some cricket balls. Trust me.
Yeah, and the rugby coach and
the coaching. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You must have been going crazy in lockdown. You must have been itching to get back out.
Yeah, but you can still go running, can't you? You can still go running. That was all saving grace of where I lived.
Yeah, absolutely. Secondly, obviously there's lots of people that are going to be having tough times in regard to money. Is there any piece of advice that you've given or got that you sort of live by within sort of the world of money?
God, my husband would laugh at this one. I wouldn't say I'm the greatest. I'd say my perspective is it's only money, right? It's only money. The most important thing is your health and those of your family and loved ones, really.
Yeah. That's good advice.
That's it. I have no money wisdom.
Get your priorities right.
Yeah.
And finally, just a piece of wisdom that you strive to sort of live your life by.
Well, I mentioned Dawn Marriott-Sims earlier, who's a great female role model, and one thing she said to me, which stuck with me, and I say a lot to my teams actually, is seek forgiveness, not permission. So that's a mantra I adopt a lot, and I think you cut through an awful lot of bureaucracy and indecision if you can live by that mantra. And I've definitely, you know, there's been times when it's tripped me up and I've had to apologize, but most of the time it's fine. It serves me well. Brilliant.
That's a great piece of advice. And just finally, with a question we always ask at the end is there any book which has helped sort of shape your career or life, or just something that you've really enjoyed reading, especially in this sort of lockdown period?
Well, the book I think all leaders quote at the moment is Matthew Syed's Rebel Ideas. So I'm not going to do that, but that is brilliant. The other one I've read in the last year, which really struck a chord with me, is Daniel Coyle's The Culture Code, which talks a lot about the importance of belonging and of creating belonging in teams and of psychological safety, and that being one of the core success factors for successful teams. I would highly recommend any leaders to read Daniel Coyle's book. Absolutely.
That sounds really sort of relevant for the crisis situation we've been through, and leaders being able to extend that sort of blanket of care and empathy across their teams.
Absolutely. And it links completely to that point about authenticity and empathy. You know, being yourself and encouraging everybody around you to be their selves and to be comfortable in their own skin and expressing their opinions. And that's how you get the best out of everybody. Yeah.
Cath, I was just going to say that it's been really great having you on the series. Thank you. It's clear from the host of questions that we've had that not only do people who know you find you inspiring, but others who don't know you have found you inspiring. I've loved the way that Ben and I, I'm sure Ben would agree with me, have loved the way you've answered the questions. It's been really useful. Stay on the line when we come off air, and we'll have a bit more of a chat. But thank you very much for your contribution and sharing your wisdom and experience.
Well, thank you both for having me, and thank you people who have listened. I'm humbled. People have. Thank you.
Thanks, Cath.
Thanks so much.